Okay, something more lighthearted and fun, and might answer some questions I have about Breath of the Wild. And it's probably gonna give me some spoilers for TOTK that I don't really care.
Surprised new players with the amount of depth and attention to detail provided both its engaging gameplay systems as well as its meticulously well-crafted world design.
I'll have to retest.
What many players find even more surprising is the amount of planning and detail that was provided to the series' overarching lore, because that amount is almost zero. They didn't plan out anything. You know the Triforce?
No.
One of the most iconic symbols in all of gaming? That's a retcon. The Triforce didn't even exist as a singular object until the third game. Until then, each triangle was just its own separate object. And in the first game, there was only 2 of them. It is actually easy to understand why the series lore originally had to be an afterthought once you realize that a single frame from this video takes up more memory than the first 2 games combined. But what is less easy to understand is that even after Nintendo started creating a cohesive timeline to the series in its third entry, known to us today as the Zelda timeline, they still ended up retconning it for almost no reason every few years. With series creator Shigeru Miyamoto at one point, and I am not making this up, seemingly just forgetting what the timeline was when asked in an interview and making it up on the spot. But we'll get to that later, because today I'm not just going over what the Zelda timeline is as it stands today, but I'll be going over the history of the
world may never know.
Every iteration of the timeline since the series began, in this timeline of Zelda timelines. The first Zelda timeline debuted in 1986, along with the first and only game in the series at the time, introducing us to the land of Hyrule along with Link, Zelda, and Ganon. With just a single game, it's less of a timeline and more of a time point. Truly a dark time for Zelda timeline enthusiasts such as myself. What the hell is this? Fun fact while we're here, did you know that every dungeon in this game was actually designed to look like something? We have an eagle, a crescent moon, a skull, January the following year happened.
Oh no.
A direct sequel to the first game centered around the attempted resurrection of Ganon. Finally, we had a second Zelda time point, and take 2 time points, draw a swish from one to the other, and bada bing bada boom, we got a timeline, baby! What a jolly year this is. Fast forward 4 years to 1991, and we see our third game in the series, in the first entry where it wasn't immediately apparent of how it connected to the previous 2. However, the manual of the game does give us a bit of a hint, describing an event where a man called Ganondorf gained access to the Golden Land and stole the Triforce, becoming series antagonist Ganon in the process. To prevent him from invading Hyrule, the Golden Land was sealed by the 7 sages, trapping Ganon within it. This event came to be called the Imprisoning War, and not only served as a setup for A Link to the Past, but also as the origin story to Ganon. And since this game is apparently the first clash between Ganon and Link, it is fairly safe to assume that this game serves as the prequel to the first 2. This would later be officially confirmed with the release of the official strategy guide for the game at the beginning of 1992. The game itself honestly doesn't have too many events that will be important to the greater timeline other than Link kills Ganon at the end, so I'm not going to go over it here, but it does introduce the iconic Master Sword to the series, which in the end credits Link puts back into its pedestal where it sleeps forever. Also, I saw this while editing, so now all of you have to see it too. The pedestal they keep the Triforce on is covered in Minecraft creepers for some reason, which tells me that this series takes place in the Minecraft universe, but that is a point in space and not in time, so I do not have to worry about that for this video. Great. You can have that one for free.
This guy's awesome. Who is this?
Time for the first train wreck. On June 6th, 1993, Link's Awakening was released.
But that is a point in space, and so I don't have to worry about it for this video. Guess what? OnADock, you get a fucking subscribe and a like. That's great. That's all it takes, guys.
Nintendo, what the hell is this box art? It's literally just the game logo, and the logo itself is the same as A Link to the Past, but with the subtitle changed. You didn't even try for this one. I'll be using the Remakes logo for the timeline here. It's got some cute little trees on it. The story of this game is quite interesting. In this game, Link takes a nap while operating a ship and then wakes up in a shipwreck. This does not relate to the greater series lore in any way, shape, or form. The game manual does, however, say, though you fulfilled the Hyrulean prophecy of the legendary hero and destroyed the evil tyrant Ganon, the land of Hyrule enjoyed only a precarious peace. Who knows what threats may arise from Ganon's ashes? So the game does have to take place after one of the 2 times Link kills Ganon, after either A Link to the Past or the first game. With this uncertainty, though, the timeline was up to debate and would remain so for over 5 years until November 1998 with the release of the now classic Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which is not only the first 3D
said
game in the
Ocarina,
series,
not
but also
Ocarina.
the
What's
first
wrong with
game
you?
with a significant amount of lore building that wasn't
I'm
relegated to a
unsubscribing.
book no one wanted to read. You get to play games, not read, Nintendo. In this game, we see the origin of Ganondorf, king of the Gerudo people. He swears fealty to the king of Hyrule, but after a bad dream, Zelda comes to believe that Ganondorf may be after the Triforce. The king doesn't take his 10-year-old daughter's dream as a serious threat, but Link's dumbass sure does. So Zelda hatches a plan with him to protect the Triforce.
Wow, that is definitely not on a Nintendo.
For herself before Ganondorf does. It is
That is,
also
like,
revealed that the
modded.
Sacred Realm is sealed behind the Master Sword. Upon pulling it from its pedestal, Link is sealed away by the gods. For
Yeah, that
7
looks
years until he's
good.
old enough to wield it properly, because the Master Sword is for adults.
Oh, I
only,
forgot they
except, of
re-released
course,
it.
for all the times when it isn't. In this 7 years, the Sacred Realm is still open, but now no one is around to stop Ganondorf
Excellent
from waltzing
work.
in and taking the Triforce for himself. Real bang-up job, Zelda. Great work.
Yeah.
However, upon touching the Triforce, the gods say, okay, new rule. You don't get the full Triforce. You only get the part that reflects you the most. The Triforce then splits into 3 smaller Triforces, with the Triforce of Power going to Ganondorf, the Triforce of Courage going to Link, and the Triforce of Wisdom going to Zelda, for some reason. Once Link is done with his timeout, he is told by the Sage of Light Rauru that he needs to find the other 5 sages of the Sacred Realm, who together can seal Ganondorf away from Hyrule. After successfully gathering the sages, Zelda reveals herself to Link and is immediately kidnapped by Ganondorf, who plans to steal her piece of the Triforce. Fantastic work, Wisdom Girl. Link faces Ganondorf in a final confrontation, and upon his defeat, the 6 sages, along with Zelda, the secret 7th sage, seal Ganondorf away in the Sacred Realm. Then, in a very good decision that I'm sure will not end with the death of thousands, possibly millions of people, Zelda uses the Ocarina of Time to send Link back to live out his childhood properly. The game ends with Link revisiting Zelda as a child one final time. The events of Ocarina of Time line up with those of the Imprisoning War, and actually serves to flesh out an existing part of the lore in the Zelda timeline rather than adding a new event to it. This makes Ocarina of Time the least impactful game in the overall timeline. of the
Wow,
series,
ouch.
For now. We'll be coming back to retcon, fill in some previously undiscussed details at a later point. And while Ocarina of Time doesn't do anything to help us place Link's Awakening on the timeline, to celebrate the release of the game, series creator Shigeru Miyamoto would give an interview in an issue of Nintendo Power that month, where he would finally answer a question as to where all the Zelda games fell on the timeline. Ocarina of Time is the first story, then the original Legend of Zelda, then Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, and finally A Link to the Past.
Wait, really?
It's not very clear when Link's Awakening fits in. It could be any time after Ocarina of Time. Shiggy, what the hell is this?
What?
All you had to do was put 5 games in a row, and not only did you give up on the 5th one, you actively contradicted the established lore. The time was 30 seconds.
Mia, baby. Miyamoto, darling, honey. What you doing to us?
Ago. Well, he made the series, so sure, whatever,
Yeah.
I guess. So we'll move on, because we have more games to cover anyway. In April of 2000, we get a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, covering Link's journey to an alternate version of Hyrule following the events of his quest in Ocarina of Time. Easy enough.
Is it an alternate version of Hyrule? I thought it was just like another city in Hyrule. I didn't think it was an alternate version. I don't know.
Date to the timeline. And in February 2001, we got something special. 2 new Zelda games released at the same time, with The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages and Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons. These 2 games cannot happen interchangeably, but if you get one, you get a code that you can put into the other one, opening up a new special chapter that occurs after the events of both games, where Twin Rova, the twin witch mothers of Ganondorf, revive him, and Link immediately kills him before setting off on a boat, possibly setting up for the shipwreck in Link's Awakening. Well, according to a brand new official timeline published on the official Nintendo website just a few weeks later. No, that's just a coincidence. But we do have a new official timeline from Nintendo now. So let's take a look and see where everything stands. Ocarina of Time is first, of course. Majora's Mask is second. A Link to the Past has now been retconned for a second time back to its original lore of being a direct follow-up to the Imprisoning War. The newest releases, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, are then listed following A Link to the Past, but before The Legend of Zelda and finally The Legend of Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. Most interestingly here, Link's Awakening is listed as taking place when Link crosses the sea to Eastern Hyrule in the middle of Legend of Zelda 2, meaning that one Zelda game takes place entirely within another one here.
What?
See that?
That's
that was Link's
when...
Awakening.
Oh my god! What? Did you see that? That was Link's Awakening. If I hadn't already subscribed, I would subscribe again.
And another one here. See that? That was Link's Awakening. A bit weird.
A bit weird.
But after 8 years and 2 major retcons, we finally had an official timeline where everything was clearly placed in a proper chronology, which Nintendo would endeavor to maintain until literally the next release on December 3rd, 2002, when they released a remake of Link to the Past onto the Game Boy Advance with an extra multiplayer side story.
I didn't realize I knew the timeline was all over the place, but I didn't realize it went through this many back and forths.
Called Four Swords. Four Swords contains one new villain named Vaati and 0 references to any other Zelda game, making it entirely impossible to place on the timeline. But don't worry, Nintendo was just going to add a game into the lore and make things more confusing like that. They were going to add 2 games to the lore and make things way more confusing than that with the release of The Wind Waker just 10 days later. A pre-release interview published one day after Four Swords released, with the now defunct game magazine GamePro, series director Eiji Ayanuma, and Shigeru.
They're like, we just really love these characters. We don't know where they fit on the timeline. We just want to keep reusing them.
Clear things up. I of course mean make them way more convoluted than they had ever been before. The
Awesome.
game is taking place over 100 years after Ocarina of Time. You can tell this from the opening story, and there are references to things from Ocarina located throughout the game as well. Well, wait, which point does the 100 years start from? From the end. No, I mean as a child or as a... Oh, right. Let me elaborate on that. Ocarina of Time...
That's incredible.
of sorts. One has Link as a child and the other has him as an adult. This game, The Wind Waker, takes place 100 years after the adult Link defeats Ganon at the end of Ocarina. What the hell do you mean there's 2 endings? I only saw the one cutscene, my dude. This interview would be the introduction of the split timeline to the series. Further clarification wouldn't be given for a few years, but many fans correctly speculated in a theory later confirmed in 2007 by Ayanuma himself, that in this final shot of Link returning to Zelda at the end of Ocarina of Time, he somehow helped stop Ganondorf from ever reaching the Triforce in the first place, thus creating a branching timeline where Ganondorf never managed to conquer Hyrule. This second ending, where Link stops Ganondorf as a child, would be referred to as the child ending. However, Wind Waker follows a future where Ganondorf was sealed away by the sages in the adult ending, with Ganondorf eventually breaking free from the Sacred Realm. However, since Zelda sent Link back in time into a different timeline, there is now no Link there to stop Ganondorf, and the gods have to resort to flooding Hyrule to trap Ganondorf under the ocean, with only those living on mountaintops surviving this calamity. This is the second time in 7 years you've caused an apocalyptic event to happen to your kingdom. How the hell did you earn the Triforce of Wisdom? You're supposed to be the smart one. The Wind Waker story, however, does give us a teeny tiny little hint as to where all the other games in the series go in the timeline split, though, because if you look real carefully, you can see that Hyrule is not covered in an ocean in all the other games, and Link isn't waking up drowning in any of them except for the one where he is. We still have no idea where Four Swords is on the timeline at this point compared to all the
except
other
for the
games.
one where he is.
Because on April 23rd, 2003, Superplay magazine will get to the bottom of this.
What the fuck?
Oh my
Japan.
God, please don't say anything stupid, Chicken. For every Zelda game, we tell a new story. But we actually have an enormous document that explains how the games relate to the others and bind them together. But to be honest, they aren't that important to us. Really? They're not that important to you? I couldn't tell. Also, I love the fact that he's promising how it's all written down somewhere and how everything connects, but still refuses to clarify how it actually connects. It's like me saying that all of my videos have a cohesive timeline and lore fitting them all together, which they do, I promise. You just haven't been paying close enough of attention if you haven't noticed. Isn't that right, Future Docky? That's right, Normal Docky. There truly is a cohesive chronology and story that definitely was planned out in advance. And I'm gonna bring this story to an end now that I've tracked you down. Oh no! Hasta luego. Anyway, on March 18th, the sequel to the Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures. Four Swords Adventures continues the story of Vaati from Four Swords, seemingly with the same Link. But on top of that, a new reincarnation of Ganondorf appears and is sealed inside the Four Sword at the end of the game. So we can safely say that this and the Four Swords happens at some point after Ganondorf's first death. And seeing as Hyrule isn't all that soggy, it happens in the child timeline after A Link to the Past.
Jesus, this is convoluted.
Give further details on this game in an interview with Game Informer running up to the American release on May 17th of the same year. The GBA Four Swords Zelda is what we're thinking is the oldest tale in the Zelda timeline.
What?
With the one on the GameCube being a sequel to that, taking place sometime after that. What do you mean
What?
Four Swords is the first game in the series? Four Swords Adventure explicitly states this Link was the same Link in Four Swords. He can't be in both if the first game comes before Ocarina of Time where Ganondorf is introduced. Whatever. I'm not in charge. Okay, 2 links. Okay then. But now we're in the same position as before, with one game we can't place, but instead of Four Swords, it's Four Swords Adventures now. But Nintendo wasn't done with the Four Swords games quite yet, because on November 4th, 2004, we got the Minish Cap, which deals with the creation of the Four Sword and the origin of Vadi. At least we can safely put this game as the first in the series since it's a prequel. 2 years later, on November 19th, 2006, alongside the launch of the Wii, Zelda Twilight Princess released. Like Wind Waker, this game is implied to be another direct sequel to Ocarina of Time. But in this game, it is revealed that Ganondorf was caught before he had a chance to betray the King of Hyrule, and was sentenced to death. He, however, gains the Triforce of Power during his execution, no, it is not explained how, and then uses the Triforce
Damn
to
it.
escape
I was
and
just
stage
about to
and
ask.
before getting his ass banished to the Shadow Realm by the other 5. He eventually breaks free, at which point Link just stabs him again, but this time it works. Given that this is implied to be a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, and not a single one of these guys have gills, except for when they do, most people assume this to be the first game after Majora's Mask.
It's been a long time since I played Twilight Princess.
Numa in a 2007 interview with Zelda Dream. Still no news on what Four Sword Adventures goes, though. This trend would continue for the next few games, with them being very self-evident as to where their position in the Zelda chronology is, but with no official timeline being released to cover some of the murkiness surrounding previous titles. On June 23rd, 2007, Phantom Hourglass, a direct sequel to The Wind Waker, was released, followed by Spirit Tracks, a direct sequel to Phantom Hourglass, set 100 years later in the newly founded kingdom of New Hyrule. Both very easy to place. The next game's equally as easy as well. Just at the
I was worried until he said easy to place, and I was like,
2011, Skyward Sword released. Skyward Sword is set before the Kingdom of Hyrule's founding, featuring the forging of the Master Sword, the introduction of Fi, a magic ghost that lives inside the Master Sword to serve Link and Zelda, and the origin of Ganondorf. Again. He's essentially a reincarnation of this guy, Demise, who Link kills twice in this game, once in the present and then a second time in the past. The game ends with the Hylians beginning to colonize the land that would one day become the Kingdom of Hyrule. So we can safely put Skyward Sword as the first game in the Zelda timeline before even the founding of Hyrule, which I will note on the timeline as well for no particular reason. Series director Ayanuma even gave an interview in the Zelda timeline around the release of the game, where he pretty much just reiterated what Miyamoto said in 2003. Yes, there is a master timeline, but it is a confidential document. The only people that have access to the document are myself, Mr. Miyamoto, and the director of the title. We can't share it with anyone else. Less than 1 month later, they then shared it with everyone else, with the release of Hyrule Historia on December 21st, 2011. Hyrule Historia is an official Zelda lore book from Nintendo, which most importantly for us contains the first official Zelda timeline since 2001. At this point, the Zelda timeline is pretty much set in stone, mostly. But finally, we could at long last place the final piece of the puzzle into place. What the hell is this? Alright. See this timeline we've been working on this whole time? It's all wrong now. This is the new timeline according to Nintendo. Everything up to Ocarina of Time is the same. Then of course we have the adult ending with the Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. That's all good too. But then in the child timeline we have Majora's Mask, followed by Twilight Princess and Four Swords Adventures. There it is. And that's it, because now we have a third branch in the timeline where Link just dies during Ocarina of Time, and a war ensues in which Ganondorf is sealed by the sages in the Sacred Realm. This is where
Wind Waker's right there.
Known as the Imprisoning War, so that goes back on the timeline now as its own thing again. Hopefully that's the last time that gets retcons. Hey, wait your turn. We'll get to you later. I'm not sure how Link is supposed to canonically die in Ocarina of Time, but I'm going to assume it's Zelda's fault. Because, well, it always does seem to be her fault when something goes wrong in that game, doesn't it? Anyway, the Link Dies timeline, we have first A Link to the Past. Link's Awakening is now a sequel to that game instead of happening partway through Zelda 2. Oracle of Seasons, and then Oracle of Ages, which is no longer interchangeable for some reason. I don't understand why. I'm just going to assume Miyamoto requested that one. And then finally, the original Legend of Zelda and Legend of Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. And there we have it, the official Zelda timeline as of 2011. Just 4 games left, but I'm sure now that Nintendo is literally selling copies of the timeline, they'll keep things together for us. What did I just tell you? It's not your turn yet. The next game to release is A Link Between Worlds on November 22nd, 2013, a direct sequel to A Link to the Past that takes place several hundred years after.
I thought it was just a remake. I'm an idiot. I need to get that. I need to play that.
And Triforce Heroes released on October 22nd,
That looks cool, too.
2015. All right, good.
Wow,
good.
2 3DS games. Okay.
Place on the timeline. And the streak continues with the release of
My
Breath of
God,
the
there are
Wild
so
on
many
March
Zelda
3rd,
games.
2017, which takes place 10,000
Yes.
years after the Calamity.
Yes.
Ganon was put down by an ultra.
I'm sorry, I
high-tech
love Legend of
robot
Zelda, guys.
which itself
It's so
happened
good.
hundreds,
It's such a good
possibly
series.
thousands of years after any other Zelda game.
Even with this.
In real life, humans began to master
Even with this shit show of a timeline, I'm like, man, it's such a good series.
agriculture about 10,000 years ago. So we're talking about a period of time from the last Zelda game to this one, which exceeds the entire history of human civilization. But what is that last Zelda game? Thankfully, widespread knowledge of previous Zelda games exist within this game, with Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess being explicitly mentioned during a cutscene. So we can go ahead and place this game as in the child timeline. Except, item descriptions make mention of the Great Sea from the Wind Waker in the adult timeline. And in the Japanese version of that same cutscene I showed before, they actually reference the Wind Waker, and also A Link to the Past, which are in two separate timelines from each other. Two separate timelines that are both separate from the Twilight Princess one. So it's intentionally vague as to which timeline it's on. Or is it? What if it's not vague? We've already accepted the timelines can separate, so why can't they come back together, converge? After all, we're looking at over 11,000 years from the last Zelda game to this one. A lot can happen in that time period, and if the timelines did somehow converge, that would explain why so many references to otherwise irreconcilable events can coexist in this game. So we're not just looking at a timeline with a link to the past, but a link to the pasts, plural. Alternatively, on December 15th, 2018, a licensed art and lore book for Breath of the Wild called Creating a Champion was released. Which on page 360 is a cheeky little note stating, the Kingdom of Hyrule has a long, long history. So long, in fact, that the events that occurred leading up to its founding and its early years have faded into myth. Hyrule's reoccurring periods of prosperity and decline have made it impossible to tell which legends are historical facts and which are merely fairy tale. The implication here being, the game takes place on one of the timelines,
and you're not sure which
exist
one.
As legends based on myths that didn't actually happen. This leaves any particular placement other than super far in the future pretty much impossible. Or is it? In a 2017 interview with French website Jux Video, series director E.G. Ayanuma was asked to provide some clarity on Breath of the Wild's placements in the timeline. Those timeline-related questions are difficult because we've never designed any Zelda game by saying, hey, we're going to put that one game here. We have to fit it into this period or that one, etc. That's not what comes first for us.
It shouldn't come first, but it should be a question you ask at some point. Because you know people are going to ask this question to you. So why just have it be this laissez-faire thing where you're like, yeah, we would just really want to make a fun game with no constraints, and we don't care where it fits. Like, no, you already have other lore. You need to figure out how it fits with that. Although, that being said, the idea of, like, timeline, not it being based off myth, but, like, timelines converging and then reintegrating into each other, that's a cool concept. I like that.
If we can put a game in the timeline, that's great, but as for Breath of the Wild, we haven't really decided where it belongs for now. Alright, never mind. Nintendo definitely...
Why would that not even be a thing that you think about during production at all? That's just ridiculous to me.
Definitely went with a purposefully ambiguous one that could be easily retconned later. I can't say for sure, because despite the fact that Nintendo still has an official timeline up on the website, it purposefully omits both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But hey, we're working with what we got here. But our final game to add, Tears of the Kingdom, released globally on May 12th, 2023, is a simple direct sequel to Breath of the Wild set just a few years later after the events of the previous game. So at least this game is a nice, easy to place final entry at the end of the timeline and totally doesn't complicate things any further. Yes, now's your turn. Thank you. All right, time to play the game.
It is said that my ancestors, the first of Hyrule's royal family, were born from a union with gods who had descended from the heavens.
No, they aren't. What?
They must have forged a relationship with the Hylians of that time, working together to establish...
Yeah, wait, what? I wasn't paying attention when I first...
Kingdom of Hyrule.
Oh, God.
This mural must be the Great War recorded in the royal histories. This is the imprisoning war and the events that led up to it.
Oh, come on. So we have some more direct inconsistencies with the existing timeline in this game. Let's go over some of the story elements in Tears of the Kingdom that conflict with the previous titles. First off, we have the new founding story of the Kingdom of Hyrule. In Tears of the Kingdom, King Rauru and Queen Sonia, the ancestors of Princess Zelda, are the founding members of both Hyrule's royal dynasty and of the Kingdom of Hyrule itself. In an apparent reimagining of the events of Ocarina of Time, Ganondorf appears again as the King of the Gerudo, but this time in the era of Hyrule's founding. He uses the same tactic as in Ocarina of Time, falsely submitting to the King of Hyrule to infiltrate the kingdom before stealing a sacred power and then launching an assault on the kingdom. This conflict, which would become known as the Imprisoning War, ended when King Rauru used his own power to physically hold Ganon in place for thousands of years until the beginning of the game. This game's lore connection to the greater series has not been explained by any external material or interviews at the time of writing this video. However, I've seen 3 leading theories of how this game connects to the other ones. 1. The game is a hard retcon and is rewriting the entire Zelda timeline. The entire timeline before Breath of the Wild is now canonically mythological distortions of real historical events, and Tears of the Kingdom is simply revealing their true history. I don't like this theory for reasons I'll get into, but Nintendo is literally allergic to keeping the lore consistent for more than 5 or 6 years at a time, so it's a pretty legitimate one to consider. 2. This is a new 4th branch on the Zelda timeline. None of the events in this game contradict anything in Skyward Sword. In fact, the spirit of the Master Sword can still be seen talking to Zelda in the game, so it appears that that part of the lore at least is untouched. However, as the founding of Hyrule and the early appearance of Ganondorf appear to contradict literally every other game after that, I've seen speculation that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom branch off from the rest of the games after Skyward Sword, possibly due to the time travel shenanigans in Skyward Sword where Link kills Demise twice. This still does require every other game in the series to become myths somehow, so I'm not super convinced by this one personally.
Yeah, not a fan where any of the games become myth.
I like the best is that there is no retcon. The Imprisoning War and the
Everything's
Founding
fine,
of Hyrule
actually.
featured in this game are simply different events from the ones existing in the timeline already.
That,
Remember,
it being like a cyclical universe with reoccurring characters, that makes sense. That like it's not the same Imprisoning War, it's just another Imprisoning War.
Breath of the Wild to plausibly be set after the Wind Waker, a game where Hyrule itself was destroyed entirely. So for Hyrule to exist after that, there must have been a second or third founding of Hyrule, which very easily could have been the one depicted in Tears of the Kingdom. Additionally, the Imprisoning War depicted in Tears of the Kingdom is wildly different from the one that supposedly takes place after Ocarina of Time, with no sacred realm to trap Ganon in, no Ganon, just Ganondorf, not even the Triforce, the catalyst of the original war, coming into play here, despite the fact that the Triforce is clearly visible in this present iteration of Hyrule. If Nintendo just wants to retcon all of that out of existence, I mean, they can, and they would, but honestly, this is like the 6th instance of Ganondorf being imprisoned somewhere, somehow, in the Zelda canon, so the fact that we only have 2 events called the Imprisoning War at this point is pretty much a miracle. The true timeline convergence versus the creation of myths and the resulting mythological timeline convergence issue is still here, but we're always just one interview away from Miyamoto actually saying that Tears of the Kingdom
actually it all takes place after a Mario game. Which one? Who knows?
Link smashing those like and subscribe buttons. So I'm not going to worry about hypotheticals. We don't have details to support right now. Let me know what you think the canon timeline is in the comments. I'm very interested in any other theories I haven't heard yet, but that's it for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. What's your social security number? The dating sim that wants your bank details.